Hello, and welcome to episode 479 of the Juicebox Podcast. Today, Erika Forsyth is back. You know Erika, she's the licensed marriage and family therapist from California. She's been on the show a number of times, and she's here today to answer a question from one of you about something very prevalent with teens living with type 1. Please remember while you're listening that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Please always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan or becoming bold with insulin. California residents, if you're looking for a therapist, look no further than erikaforsyth.com. I'd like to remind you that if you're looking for the Diabetes Pro Tip episodes or the Defining Diabetes episodes, they're right here in your podcast player. But you can also find them at juiceboxpodcast.com or diabetesprotip.com. If you're listening in a podcast player, please hit subscribe or follow. Thank you very much. The T1D Exchange is looking for type 1 adults and type 1 caregivers who are U.S. residents to participate in a quick survey that can be completed in just a few moments from your computer or phone. This survey is 100% anonymous, completely HIPAA compliant, and does not require you to ever see a doctor or go to a remote site. Why, you say, would a survey require that? Well, because this data is actually helping people living with type 1 diabetes. And I wouldn't want you to get confused and think, oh, this is a trial. I might have to go see a doctor. No. You can actually help people with type 1 without being in a trial and without visiting a physician. You just go to t1dexchange.org/juicebox. Click on Join Our Registry Now, and then simply complete the survey. Once you've done that, your information, which again is completely anonymous, will be used to help other people living with type 1 diabetes, and it supports the podcast. Past participants like you have helped to bring increased coverage for test strips, Medicare coverage for CGMs, and have brought changes in the ADA guidelines for pediatric A1C goals. Erika, I have a question here from Erin, and she said she's trying to give her preteen son some freedom by not micromanaging everything, and he is very capable of calculating his carbs and doses, knowing what to do, etc., but he gets lazy about it. It feels wrong to punish him, but if there's no consequences, then there seems like there's no incentive for him to try. Where's the line between keeping preteens accountable and not making them feel punished for having diabetes?
Great question. And obviously this teens and type 1 it's a challenging season. And I know in my professional work, I do work with a lot of teens and families who are kind of battling this dynamic between the parents wanting to offer and give some independence, and teens either asking for it, or sometimes, as in this question, maybe not following through the way they said they were going to. And it's all around challenging, excruciating experience sometimes for some families. And I do want to offer hope that it's a season, right? It's not going to last forever, but I know when you're in it, it feels really overwhelming and stressful. Mm-hmm. I would initially, in response to this question, I think trying to find ways to incentivize instead of punish, if that works, and maybe you've already tried that in your family, but I would sit down with your teen and talk about, okay, how can we either incentivize or offer rewards? I wouldn't necessarily structure it around food or, which could be complicated in and of itself, but maybe the teen wants to have a sleepover, or the teen wants to learn how to drive, get their permit or get their license, mm-hmm. or maybe work towards earning whether it's some kind of reward, a video game. And so maybe building in incentives for, okay, if you keep your blood sugars in range for this percentage of a time this week, we are going to do X. And if you do it again next week, you're going to get Y. Something but sitting down with them and asking for their participation engagement in that. This is a kind of like a behavior chart, so to speak, but to incentivize instead of punish. Because I think if that cycle begins where the teen is feeling like, okay, I already feel punished enough for even having type 1, which can be a thought. Then how come now I'm being punished for not taking care of something I don't even want to have?
Yeah.
And so if that is the case, I would really allow your teen to talk about that too, if they're open to it. So that's just one thought here in terms of, instead of punishing, trying incentivizing. I'll pause there. I can keep going.
Well, I have a question. Have I ever told you about the chainsaw?
About what?
The chainsaw.
No.
Okay. I just said chainsaw because you would have known if I said it. So
okay.
I have an episode that I don't believe is out yet. And I know that sounds funny that I'm not certain if it's out yet or not, but I'm a one-man show over here. Okay. So I'm a little dizzy. A woman has a teenage son who really, wants to graduate from high school and start a business cutting down trees. And the kid wants a chainsaw. Chainsaw is kind of expensive. And while we're talking, she also brings up that she can't get him to pre-bolus. And I said, and this is important to remember when you hear me talk, that I have no training whatsoever. But what I said was, well, listen, let me ask you a question. He'll never hear this. Are you going to get him the chainsaw? And she goes, yeah. And I said, okay. I said, why don't you just give him $1 every time he pre-boluses? And tell him, look, I know that sounds like it might be forever, but it's really not. If this saw is $400, you can pre-bolus 3 times a day. In 30 days, you could be a quarter of the way to your chainsaw, and the money will pile up quicker. And I'll pay you to pre-bolus a snack. Like, you might end up pre-bolusing 7 times a day. And I said, I'm like, you're going to spend the money anyway. And that became important to me because she didn't have a ton of money. You know what I mean? She couldn't just go leaving a golden trail of dollar bills around the house for the kid. I said, if it's money you're going to spend anyway, you know what I mean? Like, I was like, let's repurpose that for this. And I said, to me, the kid doesn't want anything more than that in the whole world, right? And she goes, yeah. I said, so if you have to trick a 16-year-old into learning to pre-bolus, then who cares? Because after you get to the cost of the chainsaw, he really will have done it long enough for it to form a habit, I would think. Did I give that person bad advice, or did I do okay?
No, I think it's great. And I think what's important is the carrot that you're dangling has to be something that they are longing for.
Yeah.
It's not just like, can I go to the movies or whatever? Like, I think it has, or unless you want to start small, some people do want to have smaller incentives, and they get that kind of immediate gratification, which is important in the teenage years too. Like, they want to know that what they're doing, they're going to be rewarded for, or else what's the point? So some teens can hold out and say, okay, I'm going to save and save and save, and I'm going to be incentivized by this chainsaw. I love it. So really sitting down with your teen and saying, look, what is something, and you even know as the parent at that point, what is it that they are really longing for? And it could be something that I'd say, like, what is something you're really wanting, but you think you're never going to be able to get or afford or ever maintain, like something that's really thrilling too, could be helpful.
Well,
yeah.
Every once in a while, you got to stop and give the horse some of the carrot. You can't just expect it to walk forever. Yeah, right. And I have to be honest, I see a lot of parenting like this. Like, you're just constantly mentioning things that are going to happen in the future, even if you just set them up as psychological payoffs. Like, if you do this, this is going to happen. That needs to happen then, because, I have to, just to kind of divert for a second. My son's played baseball like his whole life. Like, he really has. And since he was 3 years old, right as he was turning 4, he started playing organized baseball, and he still plays now when he's 21, organized. And I used to have this horrible feeling while I was little that a big moment never came to him. he was never up in a big moment. He was never like, and when he was 11, he caught the last ball of a championship game. And I'm telling you, there was a bigger smile on his face than I'd ever seen. And it had something to do with the fact that that game felt more important, that it had some, gravitas attached to it, and that he felt like he's the one that ended that. And so sometimes you got to get paid back. Like he played just as well in all the games before that, but he never got the feeling that he got out of that one scenario. And so you got to get that feeling once in a while, or the incentive to keep trying is harder and harder to cultivate, I think.
Right, right. Because as a teen particularly, you're not thinking about the future. You're not saying, oh, well, if I don't pre-bolus now, I'm going to have a high after I eat.
Yeah.
But I'm not thinking about, oh, maybe I'll have long-term complications when I'm 40 or 30, whatever.
Oh, if their brains worked that way, there wouldn't be any teen pregnancy. Because as an adult, you know how scared you are when you think you're going to get somebody pregnant. But no one feels that way when they're 17 for some reason. It's their brains aren't in that space.
It's impulsive and instant gratification. And I think so allowing them to receive some sort of reward, whatever that is, if you're working towards that, if they're needing to incentivize, I think is important to do that. Right. Yes.
Well, I am glad that I did not lead that person astray.
No, it's good.
Because there are sometimes I'm just like, I get done sometimes like I say a lot of stuff. I wonder if it's all okay. But no, I felt really comfortable about that. And it was one of those things, actually, that was one of those great episodes where we were just talking through a thing. Like she didn't have any reason to come on. She was having like some sort of like a thing. And I was like, come on, and we'll just talk about it. Like two people on the phone together and let's see what we can come up with, Okay. So I have a question here from Bridget. It says, I'd like to understand how to foster a growing independence in a teenager while still keeping a safety net. And I imagine, as you do, I guess, the safety net she means is a health net of safety, not getting too low or too high or that kind of stuff.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. So I think it's important to understand, I think it's a great and very common question as well, that what teens are going through, and we might have all of a general idea that, they want to be independent. They feel like they know everything. They know what's best for them. One analogy that I've read in a book years ago and recently came across from a book called The Yardsticks is it talks about the analogy of for particularly like the 12, 13, 14-year-old and the significance of their room in the house. Like it becomes, if they don't have their own room yet, or if they do have their own room, their own personal bedroom becomes very significant, that they get to decorate, they get to become kind of the king or queen, so to speak, of their territory. But it's significant to think about that their bedroom is still a part of the house. Right. So they're saying, I'm here, but I'm separate. Or I'm here, but look who I am now. So they're able to kind of exercise some authority, control, independence over who they are. And they get to kind of make all of those choices. Right. Yeah. But with that, then as a parent, you get to have these conversations with your teen saying, okay, if you are kind of owning your territory of your bedroom, I'm going to be handing over some responsibility. I'm not going to be coming in there and cleaning up your room or doing your laundry. So with that sense, along with their increase in freedom and their need for freedom in these years, also comes the responsibility. And I think that is the struggle, right? As a teen, as they're trying to create their own identity, is how do I balance? This is the teen thinking, or not thinking, but acting well all the time. How do I balance this freedom and responsibility? And also just kind of thinking through, and I'll apply this to type 1 in a second here, that a parent, they shouldn't be afraid to knock on the child's door, right? The bedroom door, but it should be allowed. And so you're kind of shifting slightly this locus of control, right? If the bedroom is off limits, the parent is knocking and the child's going to let them in. But you're not relinquishing total parental authority, but you're shifting that locus of control. And ultimately, teens, they want to talk to their parents. They really do. And parents want to talk to their teens, but they really don't know how. And so I think going back before addressing the type 1, I think it might be really significant for you as the parent and caregiver to understand what it is they are actually going through as a teen, to not relinquish parental authority, but to shift some of that control over to them. And then you might need to initiate that conversation. And I think remembering that as teens, they just want to be heard.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would strongly suggest that parents say little and listen a lot. And if you do need help in that department of just kind of going back to the basics of reestablishing a relationship with your teenager, a really excellent book is by Adele Faber and Elaine Moslish. The book is titled How to Talk So Kids Will Listen and Listen So Kids Will Talk. Again, that's by Faber and Moslish. So that if you are finding that you are having this battle with your teen around type 1, I would maybe take a step back first as the parent and say, okay, how can I enter my child's world through their lens as a teenager?
Yeah.
So that's just kind of my first thought.
Can I add
so
there?
Yeah, I can pause. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I want to add there that I think I found for myself, I guess I should say,
Mm-hmm.
that my recollection of my young life is probably not 100% reminiscent of what it was actually like or what I was thinking back then. So when your kid's going through a thing, it's so easy to think like, oh, I remember this. Like, but you probably don't. You probably don't really remember what it was like to be that age and to have those feelings. It's funny you brought it up as an example about the room, because when COVID started and I started noticing, Kelly and I both started noticing Arden going a little stir crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Arden said, I was thinking I'd like to redo my room. And there's that first reaction where you're like, there's nothing wrong with the room you have now. And I would like to keep the money I have in my pocket, if you don't mind, but fair enough. She's older now and she wanted to redo it. And we let her repaint. We let her replace her bed. And she wanted like a table with chairs, and she set it up. It's very much like a studio apartment now and not like a kid's bedroom. She's,
how old is she?
She's going to be 17 this summer.
Yeah.
Right?
That's
right. She's got a little round table with 4 chairs around it and a lamp, which she said, when my friends are over and we eat, we can eat around this table. And it's easy as an adult to listen to that and go, I bought a table. It's downstairs.
Right. It's all the dining room. Yeah.
But we were like, okay. And she said, and the bed takes up too much space. I'm going to get a smaller bed. And your first thought is, well, you have like a double bed. You want to go to a single? And wouldn't that be less comfortable? But that's not what she cared about. What she cared about was making more space. She got rid of her dressers and put a system inside of her closet and moved all of her clothes into her closet. And she made it exactly the way she wanted it. If I showed you Arden's room, you'd say it doesn't look anything like any kid's bedroom that you've ever seen. And she loves it. And the way I can tell is that every couple of months when I'm in there, she'll comment a little bit, ask me a question. Do you still like the color I picked? I said, I do. It's great. How do you like it? She's like, it's good. I was like, okay. Do you still like that I took up the carpet? I said, I think it's nice. It's easier to clean. What about you? She said, oh, I hear the noise from downstairs a little more now. And just to let her have that experience, it was a really big deal. And, bonus, it took months. So it kept her, right? It kept her focused on something. She was like, she was like the project manager of her room redesign, and what did it end up costing us in the end? Not very much, it was a good experience.
Right. And how much, like we were talking about earlier, like authority and agency that you feel over her life of being able to do that. Like it's such an excellent example of finding those opportunities to relinquish control. I mean, within, right. But then you probably had a budget and you had some probably constraints around that.
We did.
But you said, go for it.
Yep.
Right?
I said, within this amount of money, you can do whatever you want.
Right.
Also, what it led to then was I used to separate her clothing. Like, I don't fold the kids' clothes, but I'll lay them in like flat piles so they don't get wrinkled and give them to them. But Arden's would sit in my room. And then once she had more space in her room, I was like, oh, well, it can sit in her room now. So I take it and I put it in this spot. And I've noticed her being more diligent about putting her clothes away. And it didn't happen all at once. It took a lot of time for her to go, okay, I guess no one's going to put this away. It's on me. Then she's got to find time in her schedule. Then she's got to find the energy to actually do it. And then she's got to have to care about it enough to do it. That took months. And I think very fervently about parenting, that my job is really to repeat the same thing over and over again without sounding annoyed until somebody figures it out. And and that's sort of how I saw this thing. Like I didn't say, hey, look, you're now in charge of this. Take care of it. You know, do it right now. And if you don't do it the first time, I'm going to yell and scream at you. I just kept piling the clothes up. And one day I think the pile fell over and she's like, oh shit, I guess I got to do this. And, you know, and that's how it went.
Well, and that is like such the great example of, she was going through that struggle of like, okay, I've got increased freedom in some areas, but now I've got this responsibility of putting my laundry away. So she kind of went through that struggle until it became like, okay, it's bothering me. I'm going to show some responsibility and put it away of my own things. Right. Yeah.
It is unreasonable to expect that because you tell somebody to do something, they're suddenly going to shift everything in their brain that tells them what to do and just start doing it. It doesn't, you know, things don't work that way, I don't think.
Right. And I think then applying that to the type 1, wherein lies the fear factor of, oh my gosh, okay, my teen wants this independence, wants the freedom in management and making choices and, you know, all of it. But they're going through this struggle, this identity struggle of they don't quite have full responsibility. And yet they're wanting the freedom, right? And so I was going to say, and when they do it wrong, it's not a pile of clothes falling over. It's a blood sugar going to 55 or 355. And how do you manage the slow necessity of transition with the immediate need of safety and health? Just going to jump in here real quickly and remind you of 3 things. First thing, t1dexchange.org/juicebox. If you have type 1 or you're the caregiver of someone who has type 1 and you live in the United States, this is something you can do in just a few minutes that will immeasurably help other people living with type 1 diabetes. You can do it from your phone, from your tablet, from your computer, from your sofa. You don't even have to get up. Go take the quick survey. The information that you leave behind will be anonymous, HIPAA compliant, and help a lot of people living with type 1 diabetes. t1dexchange.org/juicebox. I also want to remind you that if you're looking for the Diabetes Pro Tip episodes, they begin at episode 210 in your podcast player. You can also find them at juiceboxpodcast.com or at diabetesprotip.com. At diabetesprotip.com, you'll also find the Defining Diabetes series. And of course, Erika Forsyth. Erika is available to California residents at erikaforsyth.com. Links in the show notes, links at juiceboxpodcast.com. Now let's get back to Erika. The slow necessity of transition with the immediate need of safety and health. Therein lies the struggle for the parent-teen relationship, right? Where you as the parent, as the caregiver, are fearful. So you see the numbers going up or down, and then the next thought is fear, and you want to protect your child as the caregiver. You want to do everything you can to protect your child, no matter what age.
Yeah.
And I think going back to, okay, is this a one-off example? Has my teen demonstrated kind of general patterns of independence? I think just kind of like with anything, you need to let them earn your trust. And so maybe it's okay, Bobby is saying as a 14-year-old or whatever age, but around 14, he's saying he wants to be able to look at his numbers and pre-bolus without consultation, right? Like that's what they want to be able to make decisions independently.
Right.
So you say, okay, we are going to give you this opportunity for us to earn trust in you that you can do this. Mm-hmm. And so you try it you start with whatever and you can chart it out too. I've done this with families. We're like, okay, we're going to chart this out. You're going to do it on Monday afternoon, and then we're going to do Wednesday afternoon, and then we're going to increase kind of the time, the length of time, and the frequency to say, okay, you did a great job, knowing that just like as caregivers, there are going to be, mishaps. So I think offering them these opportunities to demonstrate that they can do it. So then you're saying, hey, I want you, help me trust you, right? Like you need to earn the trust, just like with anything, like with driving, taking other, kind of adult-like decisions. And so building in a plan with them. Yeah. And having their input, I think, is always significant of like, what do you think feels fair? Should we let you make decisions for all day on Monday, or should it just be for dinner?
What do you think about when to step in? Because I'm a long range guy. Like I'm definitely one of those people. Like if I'm going to rob a bank, I'm not going to do it for 5 years, and I'm really going to get it right. And so, during this pandemic thing, there's been times where Arden's in her room, doing classes in the morning, and I'm in here working. And once in a while, I'll see her. She walks by, doesn't say anything. I see her go downstairs. She comes back up with an armful of food. And I look at her and I go, hey, and she goes, I got it. And she doesn't got it. Like, I know she thinks she does, but she'll never pre-bolus enough, right? Because she's 16. And so I go, okay. And then she goes. And I think of that as like, I'm building trust. She knows I trust her. She'll take care of it. But then there's a moment where if it doesn't go well, bolus-wise, I kind of roll up to her and I go, hey, that bolus was pretty good. I said, I think it just maybe wasn't enough here. We're going to have to add a little more now. No big deal. This will be fine. And I let it go and I let it go and I let it go. And I've been doing that for 6 or 8 months now. And with the long range goal of her understanding, oh, I am trying, but it's not quite working, but it doesn't seem to be too bad. And then it kind of culminated into this morning where she wanted Cinnamon Toast Crunch, where we didn't have time to pre-bolus. And I mean, it's now been an hour since I told you that. So it's been so long ago that I told you about this in a different episode of the podcast. Okay.
Yeah.
And Arden's blood sugar right now, if I told you that she had Cinnamon Toast Crunch without more than a 7-minute pre-bolus, and that I did not measure the milk or the cereal, what would you guess her blood sugar is right now?
That you didn't measure, that she did?
No, nobody measured it. It just got poured into a bowl. And then poured into a bowl. If you had to guess in most situations, what do you think her blood sugar would be an hour later?
Oh, I would probably say in the 200s, 300s.
Yeah. It's 118. So
brilliant.
Yeah. But I wanted her to see that there was a way to bolus something that she thought of as vicious on her blood sugar without such a pre-bolus. So now in my mind, she's got a connection. She knows she pre-boluses, but not enough when she's on her own, and that it needs to be fixed. But today she gets to see no pre-bolus that doesn't need to get fixed. I just want her to see, wow, there's a lot of possibility in here. Maybe this isn't as strict as I think it is. And maybe this old man knows something he should be telling me that I maybe should be listening to. Like, and to me, that's a long-term plan, because I could have walked up to her and told her that, but I don't know what good that's going to do. Anyway,
so like kind of, so teaching, you're teaching, you're modeling, and you're giving her opportunities to see different variables too, right? I think that's helpful. Like you can, within reason, and if you're able to manage, eat quickly, or not waiting for whatever your pre-bolus designated time is, and then she gets to gain that independence over time. And you guys have a great relationship too of trust, it sounds like,
And I haven't had to give away any of her long-term health to accomplish this. Her A1C is still in the 5s. So it's not, and that's the one thing that I see people say that always like it turns the screw in my heart the wrong way. It's that, well, they want to take over now. So, okay, their A1C is going to go from 6 to 9. But at least they're figuring out. I'm like, that doesn't seem like a good idea to me. And there's that me seeing other people do that made me think long and hard about like, how are we going to do this transition without that happening? And I don't know that I'm going to be successful yet, but these are the steps I've taken so far. And our relationship is good. I mean, but she's still 17. Like she's still says horrible things to me and treats me like I'm a moron, sometimes. and I still go off the handle sometimes. And I'm like, oh my God, everything seems irritating. I'm a person too. And I didn't exactly grow up well. If you're listening to this podcast into this many episodes, you realize I'm almost feral. Like it's weird that I ended up even okay. Anyway, that's pretty much it. I think that's smart.
Well, I think you had brought up, when do you intervene, right? So to prevent either the increase, the raise in your A1C, or to prevent, the long-term complications. I think going back to always inviting your teen into the conversation of like, okay, on Wednesday, we are going to allow you, or, we're going to give you this opportunity to earn our trust. Now, together, let's determine what number is it okay? Am I going to intervene?
Yeah.
And you write it down, and you have that agreement with your teen to say, okay, is it going to be 150 with the arrows, diagonally, or is it going to be whatever it is, right? Like it'd be very clear if you're on a CGM. Is it
an hour into it? We're going to check.
Is it an hour? Yeah. The time, the arrow position, and the number.
Yep.
And then you say, okay, and I'm going to text. And then really clearly inviting the team, say, okay, what is our text message going to be? Like if they're at school. And one thing is interesting that I have heard that you kind of noted during COVID, teens have done a little bit better. And this is not obviously across the board, but from what I've heard at home, because then you can just you can all manage it together, but you also don't have that peer factor. And so if you are finding as your teens are re-entering into school and, so-called normal life, and you're seeing maybe a little bit more of this either defiance or desire to be independent or forgetting to bolus. Number one, that's just normal. And number two, kind of inviting your teen back into that conversation of like, okay, this is how we were doing during COVID. I know it's not always going to be this way, but how can we kind of reestablish what was happening at home,
right?
And create kind of those expectations and boundaries. But it is a constant challenge. And while I have two little girls, I don't have teens yet, but I've worked with a lot of teens professionally, and I know what I was like as a teen with type 1. And it wasn't always pretty. And so I cheerlead you all and support you. And just remembering that it's not going to last forever.
That is important too. It is hard when you're younger because everything, as a younger parent, like everything feels like now is forever. And it really isn't. Like I'm almost 50, and I have a 21-year-old son, and I guess I might be young to have a 21-year-old a little bit, but you look back and you're like, oh, I remember being so worried about that, and it didn't end up mattering. Mm-hmm. But it did matter in the moment. It doesn't matter now. Like there's a now, there's micro and macro to everything, and there's what's important now and what later you'll be like, oh, I guess not. That wasn't really important. I can't believe I spent so much time on that. Do you have enough time to talk about kids burning out on technology in this episode, or do you have to go?
Yes. No, we can. And before we transition into that, mm-hmm. I was thinking, I just listened to the episode of the 3 girls in the Cayman Islands, which was just fabulous.
Yeah.
And it made me think of, here they are, they could be feeling isolated on an island as a type 1, but yet they have each other. And the significance for your teen, if they really are struggling with that, why me? I feel so isolated. I just want to be like my friends. If they are open to it, I do encourage you to kind of either outreach through your endo or whatever your treatment team is, to see if you can connect your teen with other teens, and now with, everyone's very comfortable with remote and virtual correspondence. To integrate that into your teen's life, whether it's just a phone call, a Zoom, a FaceTime, whatever it is, just to kind of decrease that sense of isolation and I don't feel normal type feeling, right? Yeah. And I want to be like my peers. So that was just my last thought.
Wasn't it interesting to see the 3 of them? They, you hear kids like, I just want to be like my friends. There's these 3 girls living on this island with not that many people, and they are just like their friends. even though they have
it's so
type 1.
beautiful. Yeah.
Wasn't it great too that they were too young to feel trapped? Like when I was like, how would you get away? Like, and then I ramped it up. I was like, if Godzilla came, how would you get away? And they're like, I don't know. Like they don't even think of it as that way. Me as an adult, I'm like, you are trapped on a tiny rock in the middle of the ocean. You're going to die.
Right.
But they didn't see it that way. They were really lovely. Actually.
Yes.
Yeah, I enjoyed that a lot. Okay. So, Heather's like, she says, how do you help your child work through burnout? She says she has a 9-year-old who was diagnosed just over a year ago. They're using, CGM and pump for almost a year, but she feels like they've hit the wall with technology. I hear people say this a lot. I have to admit, I don't know that I understand it. And because then they say, I think we might need to take a break. And even though as parents, we don't want to.
Yes.
I'm always weirded out by that. Like, so I'm a bad person to ask because I really have a 1978 Northeast version of an answer for this, which is kids don't get to make medical decisions in my house.
Right.
With it. But because I'm always like, what else are you going to put the 14-year-old in charge of? Paying the mortgage? Like, they're 14. But what's the rest of it that I don't think about?
Well, two thoughts.
Yeah.
For number one, personally, I have felt that way. I actually was on, I did what we used to call just shots, but now it's, MDI.
Yeah.
I gave myself shots and took my blood sugar finger pricks for the kind of first third of my so-called diabetes career. Mm-hmm. And then I transitioned to a pump in college. And again, I'm not giving medical advice. You want to do this with consulting. If you ever decide to do this, consult with your doctor first. But I remember feeling like I just wanted to take the pump off. And if I did that and I would say, I'm going to take the pump off for a week and I'm going to go back to injections. And I did consult with my doctor and they told me how to do it, giving, do the Lantus, this amount and do this, I was taking, I think, regular at the time. And I didn't even last a week because it was so irritating to have to be constantly giving myself injections. And so I probably put the pump back on within the next day or two because I'm like, you know what? I'm kind of irritated by having my pump on because really it's just it's the thing that's on your body that can get annoying and I get it. And so you feel like mentally, if I remove this pump, I'm not going to have to be thinking about it, maybe my type 1 as much. But then you're having to constantly go back to what you used to be doing. And it's irritating too. And I had this experience with the CGM. Mm-hmm. I have a Dexcom and I don't know when this was, but I think my time had lapsed. It was 10 days. I was going to remove it. I'm like, you know what? I kind of want to have a break mentally from having it on wherever it was on my body. And I'm going to do finger pricks. And I did not last through a full 24 hours. So I'm like, what am I thinking? I don't know. I'm so used to knowing my trends and where I am. And now I'm having to finger prick, and I would do it 10 or 15 times a day, it's a lot. Right. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I cannot wait to get the CGM back on. And so I don't know, again, do this with the support of your doctor, but it might be worth trying because then your child might wonder oh my gosh, it's so much easier having my pump or CGM on me. Anyway, that's my first thought. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, is there any correlation? I'm glad you had a personal experience with it because it makes it so much more real. But is there any correlation to, when you see somebody break up with somebody, they're like, this guy's my problem. And then 3 days later, you're like, it turns out he wasn't why I was upset. Now I miss him. And is there any of that? Is that that's called transference in the business, right? Where you are mad about something, you put it on something else.
Yep.
Every married guy right now listening is laughing their ass off. They're like, is that what that's called? That's what that's called when it happens to me, is it? But yeah, no, that idea of it's just I'm irritated and I'm aware of this must be my problem. And I'm so thrilled that that's what you said because go ahead, break up with me. And I'll wait over here for you to realize maybe that wasn't a good idea. Maybe your pump is just sitting in a drawer going, she'll be back. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Let's just count down.
Yeah,
right.
I'll take a break. She'll be back soon. Don't you worry. She doesn't that makes so much sense to me. So don't fight it.
I mean, that would be my suggestion. And because
Okay.
I think there is something too, though. Yes, it is the like, okay, I'm frustrated with like, it's can be annoying having type 1, right? Like you're having to think about it all the time.
Yeah.
And then you have this visual reminder and it can get caught on things and and it can fall off and that can be frustrating. But I think ultimately, once you take a break from all of the incredible technology that we do have and you go back to, the injections and the finger pricks, you kind of realize, wow, I still have type 1 and doing all of this is more frustrating and irritating than actually just having the pump on or the CGM on.
Right.
But then it's kind of a nice thing because then you're like, oh, I'm so grateful for this. The thing that I couldn't wait to rip off, I go back and say, oh, I'm so grateful for the CGM.
Yeah.
So it's kind of this beautiful process and allowing that to happen, I think is okay. Given, you're
Oh no.
you feel safe doing it. Right.
Well,
Yeah.
When one day Kelly kicks me out, right? I know that like a month or two later, she's going to be walking around as like dust bunnies collect around her feet and she'll go, oh, I didn't know he was taking care of that. You know what I mean?
Oh my gosh.
Right. She'll be like, oh, I wonder what
yeah.
else he was doing. I have to tell her if she's ever listens to this, where do you find out all the stuff I do that you don't have to do?
Yeah.
Like it's,
right.
And I do think that about the technology as well. And you made me think a little bit about, I know we're wrapping up, but you made me think a little bit about people who have other medical issues where they can't get away from their technology ever. And it made me realize how kind of lucky you are to have diabetes, that there is an alternative treatment method where you could at least experience it without. And by the way, for people who don't use the tech, who are doing fine, I think that's terrific. This is just, this is for people who, this was specifically the idea about burnout, about technology, about like, oh, I have to get away from this or it's bothering me. But maybe it is just a reminder of the fact that you have diabetes and you're just going to find a different reminder when those are gone and make your maintenance more, heavy or cumbersome somehow.
Yes.
And you said, I'm sorry, did you have another thing that you wanted to say about that? Did I cut you off in the middle of getting to number two?
No, I think,
okay.
I think that was kind of the gist of it.
Okay.
And allowing your child to be angry at the technology is okay, because ultimately we know we probably are just angry and frustrated and sad about having the illness.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes it's easier to be angry at the things that we need to take care of ourselves and to say, gosh, you know what, allowing for those emotions, and giving your child space to maybe they're not verbalizing it, but they're saying it by like, please rip this thing off of me.
Right.
That's okay. And just to kind of give space to that. Yeah.
And they'll likely get back to it. Because
I think so.
Yeah. Because you realize that the anger doesn't go away, and then you need to, then that's a new thing to address. But so. Right.
Then that you allow that, whether it's through your conversation with your parents or a therapist or whomever, your support group. Yeah. Let that come out.
Yeah. And it I'll tell you, it exists. And I think we'll probably answer this question another time when we record, but it exists at ages that you don't expect, because there was a time when Arden was maybe 5 or 6 where she told me just out of the blue, and I would have told you that Arden does great with diabetes. I don't see her thinking about it too much. Like when people are like, kids are so brave, I always think like they're not really brave. They just don't have another choice. Like there's a difference between bravery and not having a choice. Bravery is, you're across the street and a car blows up and you go pull somebody out of it, even though there are other people there helping. And and not having a choice is you're in the car and you need to get out anyway. Like that, there's a difference there. And so, she says to me, we have a friend who has a child who's, I don't even know what the correct term is, but has some mental deficiency that impacts a child's life. And she said, I'd rather be him than me. And she was like 6 or 7. And I was like, why? And she goes, because I can die from this. He's not going to die from that. And I was like, wow, I did not know that my 7-year-old had that grasp of all this. And so, it's easy to say kids don't understand deeper things, but I think they do. And I think they're good at hiding it. And I think you could end up seeing that as bravery. So just because they seem brave doesn't mean they don't need support and that they don't have deep understandings of the situation that they're in. is how I feel.
Right. Yes. And we often say, that children are resilient. And we've been talking a lot about that right through COVID, and that they are going to transition and be okay. But underneath, yes, they are resilient and they can persevere, but they still can have that sadness underneath the resilience. And that's okay. Yeah.
Just because your 8-year-old doesn't turn to heroin doesn't mean they're not under pressure. It just, seriously, because that's what you're talking about.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Kids are resilient because they don't have another choice, and you're in charge of their life, and they're stuck in a room. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they're not, if you let an 8-year-old out on the street and put too much pressure on I can't believe I said him or her. It was terrible. They'll fall apart just like a 45-year-old would in that situation. They just don't have the opportunity all the time. And that's why I'm imagining you see kids internalize, and then it turns to something much more drastic when they lash out finally. Is that fair?
Right. Yes. Yeah. When maybe they have the ability, they've developed to a place where they can identify and express, their emotions, then that it will come out. Okay. Yeah.
Well, Erika, thank you very much for doing this with me again. I am having a great time. I think of you as emotional Jenny. So
yeah. Wonderful. I appreciate that. Thank you.
I seriously do. Hey, huge thanks again to Erika for coming back on the show. She'll be back again, so look out for her in upcoming episodes. You can find her at erikaforsyth.com. You can find the Diabetes Pro Tips, the Defining Diabetes series, and so much more at juiceboxpodcast.com or diabetesprotip.com. And please take just a few minutes out of your day to go to t1dexchange.org/juicebox and fill out the survey. That's all they're asking you to do. Fill out the survey, and your answers will help others living with type 1 diabetes. You have to have type 1 or be the caregiver of a type 1 and be a United States citizen. Head over there now, support the Juicebox Podcast, support people living with type 1 diabetes. t1dexchange.org/juicebox. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back soon with more episodes of the Juicebox Podcast.